What if the person you trusted the most tried to bury your child alive? Face screaming in fear, one Maid heard a faint cry in the dead of night, and what she did next will shock you forever. You won't believe how one brave woman exposed the billionaire's fiancé and saved a life. Stay with me. You have to see this to believe it. Help please, somebody. The words were faint, trembling, and almost swallowed by the night. Maria froze, her broom still clutched tightly in her hands. She had been finishing up the last chores of the evening, polishing the grand staircase, checking the silverware, making sure the guest rooms were ready for the upcoming engagement party. But now, every noise in the mansion seemed to vanish, leaving her alone with that voice. It was past midnight. The mansion, with its towering walls, marble floors, and glittering chandeliers, was silent. Not a single sound except the distant rustle of leaves in the garden. And yet, she heard it again, a faint cry coming from outside, near the rose garden, where the earth had been freshly turned. Maria's heart froze in her chest. Her mind raced. Earlier that evening, she had seen Cassandra, the billionaire's fiancée, flawless in designer gowns and sparkling diamonds, dragging a small bundle out into the backyard. Maria had assumed it was gardening waste, or maybe some old supplies Cassandra didn't want lying around. After all, Maria had worked in the mansion for years and had seen Cassandra do things that seemed odd, but never this extreme, or so she thought. Now, listening to that muffled cry, Maria realized her assumption had been horrifyingly wrong. The sound was not garbage being shuffled. It was not a stray animal. It was human, and it was small and fragile. Aiden. The thought struck Maria like a lightning bolt. The 6-year-old boy, Alexander Ward's only son, had been declared missing less than an hour ago. The entire mansion had been in chaos since then, with Alexander running from room to room, calling Aiden's name in panic, while the staff scrambled to find him. Could it be? No, it can't be, Maria whispered to herself. But as the cry grew slightly louder, unmistakable and desperate, the horrifying truth began to crystallize in her mind. Cassandra. Maria's stomach twisted. She knew the truth deep down, but seeing it come to life was unbearable. That child, her boss's son, the boy who had the brightest smile in the world, whose laughter could fill the mansion with light, was buried alive. Maria's hands shook. She dropped her broom onto the polished marble floor. The sound echoed through the silent house, but no one seemed to hear. She sprinted toward the back door, fumbling with the lock, and burst into the cold night air. Her breath came in short gasps. The moonlight cast eerie shadows over the garden, and the freshly turned soil near the rose bushes seemed darker, heavier, almost alive. She didn't hesitate. She sank to her knees, hands plunging into the earth. At first it was just the surface, hard, cold, packed tightly. But then her fingers brushed against something, a small wooden crate. A crate. And then the cries intensified. Weak, frightened, desperate. "Hold on. I'm coming," Maria yelled, tears streaming down her face. She clawed at the dirt, throwing clumps to the side. Her nails tore, her palms bled, but she didn't care. Every second counted. Every second Aiden was down there could be the difference between life and death. She dug faster, her heart hammering in her chest like a drum. How could Cassandra do this? How could someone who smiled so sweetly in front of everyone be capable of this horror? Maria's mind reeled, but she didn't stop. She knew she had to save him, because if she didn't, nobody would. Finally, the crate shifted. Maria pulled with all her strength. Dirt cascaded down onto her shoulders, but she didn't care. And then she saw him, Aiden's tiny face, pale and trembling, peeking through the slats of the crate. His eyes were half closed, lips blue, hands clutching the wood as if it could somehow protect him. Maria screamed, a mixture of relief and fear. She tore open the crate, lifting the boy into her arms. He was so light, so fragile. She wrapped her coat around him, trying to warm him, whispering frantic words of reassurance. It's okay, you're safe now. I've got you." Aiden's little body shook with sobs and fright. He was alive, but just barely. Maria could feel his heartbeat racing, weak and fragile, and she knew they had been seconds away from tragedy. At that moment, the guards arrived, alerted by her screams. Alexander, hearing the commotion, came running out barefoot, panic written across his face. When he saw his son in Maria's arms, he stopped dead in his tracks. His knees buckled, and he sank to the ground, unable to speak at first. "Aiden, my boy, my baby," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. Maria handed him over gently, kneeling beside Alexander. "Sir, he's alive." But it was Cassandra. Her voice broke. She couldn't finish the words. Alexander's eyes, wide with disbelief and terror, locked onto Maria's. "Tell me what happened," he demanded. And Maria knew that the night was far from over. The truth, dark and terrifying, was waiting to be exposed. A wedding was about to be ruined. A monster was about to be unmasked. And a boy's life that had almost been stolen forever, had been saved by one brave maid who refused to ignore the cries in the night. For Maria, there was no going back. She had uncovered a secret that would shake the foundations of the mansion, and the life of the billionaire who trusted the woman he loved. But before the dawn, before anyone else could intervene, one thing was clear. Aiden was alive, and Maria would make sure of it. Alexander Ward, 40 years old, powerful, respected, and a single father, had spent years building his empire. His life was a careful balance of board meetings, philanthropic events, and raising his only son, Aiden. The boy was the light of his life, his reason for working tirelessly, his heart outside of himself. Now Alexander was preparing for what he thought would be the happiest moment of his life, his engagement party with Cassandra Hale. The grand ballroom had been decorated in white roses and golden lights. Caterers flitted around like dancers, ensuring every detail was perfect. Guests whispered in anticipation. Cameras flashed, and Alexander, dressed in a tailored tuxedo, felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Cassandra Hale entered the room, and everyone's attention immediately fell on her. She was the definition of elegance. Her long gown shimmered in the candlelight, and her smile, warm and polished, could have lit up the darkest room. The media had been calling her America's perfect fiancée, a title she wore like a crown. To Alexander, she was perfection. To the world, she was flawless. But Maria, the maid, had seen the cracks beneath the surface. She had worked in the Ward mansion for years and had learned to notice things others overlooked. And Cassandra's behavior around Aiden had never sat right with her. Maria had observed countless little moments. Cassandra rolling her eyes when Aiden asked questions. Cassandra sighing loudly when Alexander praised his son's achievements. The way she muttered under her breath in a tone meant for no one else to hear. "He ruins everything." At first, Maria had doubted herself. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe Cassandra was just impatient, or maybe she didn't understand children. But deep down, a chilling suspicion had taken root. Alexander, however, didn't notice. He was blinded by love. He believed Cassandra wanted nothing more than to be part of his life, and by extension Aiden's. He imagined a future where Cassandra would love his son as her own, guiding him, nurturing him, and building a happy family together. Everything had seemed perfect until the rehearsal dinner. The evening had begun with laughter and champagne. Guests clinked glasses, toasting the happy couple. Aiden had been sitting quietly, drawing pictures of the garden, occasionally showing them to his father with a shy smile. Cassandra, sitting across the table, had smiled politely, yet Maria noticed the subtle tightening of her jaw whenever Aiden laughed or asked a question. Then suddenly it happened. Aiden's head drooped. His small body slumped in the chair. The boy fainted, knocking over his glass of juice. Panic erupted around the table. Alexander rushed to his son, lifting him gently, heart pounding. "Oh my God! Alex, I'll take him to the guest room." "Go greet the guests," Cassandra said, her voice perfectly calm, almost rehearsed. She stepped forward, lifting Aiden's limp body into her arms. Maria's stomach twisted. She had seen that kind of calm before, the kind of calm that hid danger. But Alexander, trusting her entirely, nodded and thanked her, taking a deep breath before returning to greet the guests. Aiden never came back. At first, everyone assumed he had simply fallen asleep in the guest room. But as the minutes passed, Alexander grew anxious. He called for the staff, searched the house, and knocked on every door. Cassandra had vanished from the chaos, and when asked, she feigned panic. "He must have wandered off," she exclaimed with a trembling voice. "Call security." Alexander did as she asked, panic rising in his chest like molten fire. Guards searched the grounds, flashlights cutting through the darkness, but Aiden was nowhere to be found. The fear that had been a whisper in Alexander's mind now roared like a lion. Maria watched in horror. Something in Cassandra's demeanor didn't add up. She seemed almost satisfied, almost calm, as if the situation was exactly what she had intended. Maria's heart raced. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe Cassandra was hiding fear. Maybe she wanted to avoid causing a scene. But deep down, Maria knew the truth. She had seen the way Cassandra looked at Aiden when she thought no one was watching. That slight curl of her lips when he tripped over a toy. The cold gleam in her eyes when she whispered that terrible phrase, "He ruins everything." And now, hearing a faint, muffled cry from the backyard. The same cry she had heard earlier, echoing from the freshly turned soil near the rose garden. Maria realized with horror what Cassandra had done. Her hands shook. The reality was unbearable. Cassandra, the woman Alexander loved, the woman the world adored, had tried to kill his son. She had buried him alive. Maria's mind raced with images. Aiden trapped in the wooden crate, his small hands clawing at the soil, struggling to breathe. Every second that passed increased the danger. Every second counted. She glanced around. No one else had heard the cries. Alexander was still frantically searching the house, unaware of the backyard horror unfolding. The guards were confused, looking for a lost boy in the wrong places. It was up to Maria. Her heart hammered as she ran toward the sound, each step heavy with dread. She could barely breathe, her lungs burning, her knees weak. She had no time to call for help, no time to think, just action. Maria dropped to her knees at the edge of the rose garden, hands scrabbling through the dirt. Her fingers found the edge of a wooden crate, and she pulled desperately. The cries grew louder, more urgent, more terrified. "Hold on, Aiden. Hold on," she whispered, her tears mixing with the soil on her hands. And then she understood the full weight of the night, the engagement party, the celebration, the glitz and glamour. It had all been a mask. Behind the sparkling dresses and fancy decorations lurked a nightmare, orchestrated by the woman Alexander loved. Maria knew one thing with certainty. If she didn't act now, Aiden wouldn't survive the night. She had to save him, because some truths, no matter how painful, had to come to light, and some monsters, no matter how charming, had to be exposed. Maria threw herself onto the cold, damp soil. Her fingers dug into the earth, scraping and clawing with every ounce of strength she had. Dirt flew in every direction, falling into her hair, staining her clothes, and coating her trembling hands. Her nails were cut and bleeding, but she barely noticed. There was only one thought consuming her: Aiden. She had to save him. "Hold on, baby. I'm coming," she screamed, her voice breaking into sobs. Her chest heaved, tears streaking her cheeks, her heart pounding like a drum. Each second felt like an eternity. The faint cries from beneath the soil pierced her very soul, and Maria felt a rush of panic and determination collide in her chest. She clawed at the dirt frantically, scraping with fingernails, pulling chunks of earth away with raw desperation. Then, her fingers hit something hard. Her breath caught in her throat. She pushed harder, her hands trembling, and finally uncovered the source of the cries, a small wooden crate. The crate was no bigger than a toy chest, but it felt like a tomb. Inside, barely visible through the slats, was Aiden. His small face was pale, lips blue, and his tiny hands trembled as he tried to move. He had been drugged, his body weak and unresponsive, barely clinging to life. Maria's heart lurched. She didn't waste a second. With every bit of strength she had, she pried open the crate and gently lifted him out. His small, fragile body was heavier than it should have been, as if the weight of fear and near death had settled onto his tiny frame. She wrapped him in her coat, trying to warm him, whispering frantic reassurances as she held him close. It's okay. I've got you. I won't let anything happen to you," she sobbed. Her cries echoed across the mansion grounds, and soon the guards arrived, drawn by the commotion. Maria didn't even notice them at first. Her focus was entirely on the little boy in her arms. But when she looked up, she saw Alexander running toward them barefoot, panic and terror etched across his face. His eyes widened in disbelief, then filled with tears as he saw Maria holding his son. "No, no, this can't be happening," he shouted, dropping to his knees beside Maria. He wrapped his arms around Aiden, cradling him as if he could shield him from every harm in the world. His tears fell freely onto the boy's hair, and his entire body shook with a mixture of relief, horror, and anger. "Aiden. Oh God, Aiden," Alexander whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. Aiden, weak and barely conscious, managed a faint, trembling voice. "Daddy, she put me in a box." Those words hit Alexander like a physical blow. His heart shattered, a mix of fear, guilt, and fury consuming him. He stared at his son, the boy he had worked so hard to protect, now fragile and vulnerable, and the tears streamed down his face. Who did this to you?" Alexander demanded, his voice rising, shaking with rage. "Tell me, baby. Who did this?" Aiden, barely able to speak, whispered the words that made Alexander's blood run cold. "Daddy. Miss Cassandra." Time seemed to stop. Alexander froze, the truth crashing down like a tidal wave. Cassandra, the woman he had trusted, the woman he had loved, the woman the world called perfect, had tried to kill his son. The realization burned through him, a searing mix of betrayal, shock, and disbelief. Maria felt his gaze on her and gave a small, exhausted nod. He understood. She had saved his son's life. If it weren't for her courage and quick thinking, Aiden would not have survived the night. A doctor was summoned immediately, and Maria held Aiden in her arms as he was examined. The boy's pulse was weak, his breathing shallow, but he was alive. Minutes more, and he would have suffocated, trapped in that wooden tomb. Alexander paced frantically as the doctor worked, his hands clenched into fists. The rage and fear inside him burned hotter than he had ever known. "I should have known," he muttered under his breath. "I should have seen it, but I didn't. How could I not see it?" Maria tried to comfort him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Sir, it's okay. He's safe now. That's what matters. He's alive." Alexander's gaze softened briefly, but only briefly. Then it hardened again as his thoughts returned to Cassandra. He couldn't believe someone could hide such evil behind such a beautiful, perfect facade. His mind raced, imagining the consequences, imagining what might have happened if Maria hadn't heard the cry. Every detail, every lie, every smile Cassandra had given him seemed tainted now. He felt betrayed in a way that cut deeper than anything he had ever felt in business, in life, or in love. Meanwhile, Aiden clung to Maria, shaking but slowly regaining consciousness. His eyes fluttered open, searching the faces around him. When they landed on Alexander, a faint smile appeared, tiny and fragile, but full of recognition and trust. Alexander lowered himself to the boy's level, his voice soft now, trembling with emotion. "Aiden, you're safe. You're with me. No one can hurt you now." Tears rolled down both their faces, and for a moment the mansion, the garden, the world around them disappeared. There was only father and son reunited, and Maria, the brave soul who had risked everything to save him. But the fury in Alexander's heart didn't subside. He stood, looking toward the house, his jaw clenched. Cassandra's betrayal had to be exposed. She had tried to take his son's life. She had almost succeeded. "Maria, you saved him," Alexander said quietly, placing a hand over hers. I don't know how to thank you. You risked everything to save my son. I will never forget this, never." Maria shook her head, exhausted, covered in dirt and tears. No thanks. I couldn't let him die, not like that, not because of her." Aiden, still weak, whispered, clutching Maria's coat. She wanted to hurt me." Alexander's heart shattered again, but now his anger was sharp, directed. He would make sure Cassandra paid for what she had done, and he would make sure Aiden knew he was safe, loved, and never alone again. That night, The mansion had been filled with darkness and terror, but because one courageous maid had acted on instinct, a child's life was saved. Maria's bravery and quick thinking had prevented a tragedy that could have ended a family forever. And as Alexander held his son close, he realized one truth more powerful than any wealth or power he had ever known. Some heroes don't wear capes. They dig through the dirt with bleeding hands and a heart full of courage. Cassandra Hale had never imagined being caught. She had always been careful, calculated, and charming. To the world, she was flawless, America's perfect fiancée, the woman every magazine praised. But all of that shattered in an instant when Alexander Ward, pale and trembling with rage, held a tablet in his hands, showing footage she didn't even know existed. "Alexander, what is this?" she stammered, her voice shaking. She tried to back away, but the security guards had already surrounded her. He didn't answer, his eyes, stormy and unrelenting, fixed on her with a fury she had never seen before. Alexander pressed play. The screen flickered to life, showing footage from the mansion's rarely used backyard cameras. Cassandra froze, her face draining of color as the images unfolded. There she was, every movement, every sinister action, recorded for all eternity. First, the footage showed her carrying Aiden from the house. The boy's small, limp body cradled in her arms, his eyes half closed, barely conscious. She moved carefully, as if she were sneaking out a treasure, not a human being. Next, the video showed her digging in the moonlit garden. Her movements were deliberate, efficient, almost mechanical. She didn't hesitate. She smiled, cold, triumphant, victorious, as the crate was lowered into the ground. The faint cries of Aiden were audible, muffled, desperate, but she ignored them. And then the most chilling shot, Cassandra stepping back, brushing dirt from her hands, and allowing herself a slow, satisfied smile. A smile that would haunt Alexander forever. Alexander's voice trembled, a mixture of rage and horror. "How could you?" Cassandra attempted to protest. "Alex, don't," he shouted. "Don't you dare speak." She faltered, trying to regain control, but her world was crumbling. She had planned this meticulously. Every lie, every manipulation, every charming smile was designed to secure her place in Alexander's life. And now all of it lay in ruin, exposed by a simple security camera and a brave maid. Alexander's voice was low, dangerous. "You thought I wouldn't notice, didn't you? You thought you could bury my son, and bury the truth too." Cassandra's expression twisted into a mask of anger. I had to. I had to secure my place. He's mine. He's supposed to be mine. That brat ruined everything." "Ruined everything?" Alexander's eyes blazed. "You tried to kill my child. Do you understand what that means? Do you even hear yourself?" She spat, venom dripping from every word. "I should have been first in his life. That child was standing in my way. I couldn't let him ruin my future." Her words hung in the air, grotesque and chilling. Alexander stepped back, his stomach turning with disgust. Every ounce of trust, love, and respect he had for the woman he intended to marry evaporated in that moment. Maria instinctively stepped in front of Aiden, shielding him. The boy clung to her, trembling, hiding behind her. He had survived the nightmare, but the memory of being buried alive still haunted him. Maria tightened her arms around him, whispering soothing words, trying to reassure him that the danger was gone. The police officer, who had arrived moments earlier, turned to Alexander with a mixture of solemnity and admiration. "Sir, this maid saved your son," he said. "Without her, we'd be looking at a tragedy. Aiden might not have made it through the night." Alexander's gaze shifted, really looked at Maria for the first time. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She wasn't just someone who cleaned the house or served tea. She was the woman who had risked her life to save his child. She had followed her instincts, braved the darkness, and acted when no one else would. She had been the difference between life and death. Alexander took a deep breath, his eyes softening slightly as he looked at her. "Maria, I don't know how to thank you. You saved him. You saved my son." Maria shook her head, exhausted, dirty, trembling. No thanks. I couldn't let him die, not like that. Not because of her. The officers moved in, handcuffing Cassandra. She struggled, screaming, attempting to justify her actions. But her words rang hollow and empty against the weight of evidence. Alexander, listen to me. She shouted. Alexander cut her off with a glare so fierce it silenced the room. No. You don't get to explain. You don't get to pretend. You tried to take my son from me. That's unforgivable. Cassandra's face twisted into fury, rage, and fear all at once. But it was too late. Her carefully constructed facade had been shattered by truth, courage, and a simple act of humanity. Alexander turned to Aiden, his son still trembling behind Maria. He knelt down slowly, bringing himself to eye level with the boy. Aiden, do you understand what happened? He asked gently. You're safe now. No one can ever hurt you again. Aiden nodded weakly, clutching Maria's coat. His small voice was still quivering. Miss Maria saved me, he whispered. Alexander placed a hand on Maria's shoulder, gratitude and awe in his eyes. Yes, she did. And I will never forget it. The police led Cassandra away, her screams echoing into the night. Alexander watched her go, disgusted, horrified, but also relieved. The nightmare was over. His son was alive. Justice would be served. And Maria, the brave, selfless maid, stood at his side, a hero who had changed everything. As the mansion settled back into quiet, Alexander realized the truth about people, loyalty, and courage. Some heroes wore no title, no crown, no recognition. Some heroes simply acted when it mattered most. Maria had been that hero. She had risked everything for a boy who wasn't even her own, for a family she had chosen to protect because it was the right thing to do. And in that moment, Alexander made a silent vow, not only to protect his son, but to honor the bravery and heart of the woman who had saved him. Because Aiden was alive, Cassandra's evil had been exposed, and one maid's courage had turned what could have been a tragedy into a miracle. Aiden recovered slowly, the trauma of being buried alive leaving deep marks, not just on his body, but on his spirit. The boy who had once been full of laughter now flinched at sudden movements, avoided closed spaces, and recoiled whenever someone raised their voice. Nights were the hardest. Even after the doctor assured Alexander that Aiden was physically fine, the child refused to sleep alone. His small bed, once a place of comfort, now felt like a trap. He clutched his blankets tightly, trembling at the slightest sound, eyes wide in fear. Maria stayed close, her presence a constant reassurance. Aiden refused to eat unless she was in the room, holding his hand through every bite. He held her hand everywhere he went, whether walking through the mansion halls, playing in the garden, or simply sitting quietly by the fireplace. Maria's calm voice, gentle touch, and unwavering courage became his anchor. She had been the one to pull him from the brink of death, and now she had become the guardian of his fragile trust. Alexander watched this quietly, a mixture of awe, gratitude, and melancholy in his eyes. He had spent years trying to shield Aiden from the dangers of the world, but he realized now that no wealth, no security system, and no careful planning could replace the courage and heart of a human being willing to risk everything for someone else. Maria had become that for Aiden. She had saved his son's life, and she had saved his soul from the lingering terror that threatened to consume him. One evening, as the golden sun dipped behind the horizon, casting warm light across the expansive gardens, Alexander wandered outside, drawn by the soft sounds of laughter and murmured voices. He found Maria and Aiden sitting on the stone bench near the rose bushes, the same place where the nightmare had begun just days earlier. But now, the garden was calm, serene, and bathed in the gentle glow of the setting sun. Aiden was intently focused on a drawing, small crayons scattered around him. He hummed softly as he worked, a sound Alexander had not heard in a long time, a sound that filled him with warmth and relief. Curious, he stepped closer and bent slightly to look over Aiden's shoulder. What he saw made his heart melt. The boy had drawn 3 stick figures, one small, one slightly taller, and one tall. A tiny heart hovered above them. Alexander recognized the figures immediately. Aiden, Maria, and himself. A wave of emotion swept through Alexander. Gratitude, relief, love, and awe all at once. This small drawing, made with simple lines and childish hands, told him more than any words could. Aiden had chosen to include Maria in his family picture, acknowledging her as a guardian, a protector, and someone he trusted with his life. Alexander knelt beside Aiden, voice soft and tender. "Is this your family?" he asked gently, careful not to startle the boy. Aiden nodded, his eyes sparkling with innocence and trust. "Yes, it's us," he whispered. "You saved me," Aiden added, turning toward Maria, his small hand still gripping hers. "Like an angel." Maria's eyes filled with tears, blurring her vision, as she pulled him into a warm, protective hug. "No, Aiden, you're the brave one," she whispered back. "You held on. You never gave up. I was just here to help you." Alexander placed a firm, reassuring hand on Maria's shoulder. He looked at her with a depth of gratitude that words could hardly express. "Maria, I owe you everything. My son's life, my peace, my future. You risked everything for him, and for that, I can never thank you enough." He took a deep breath, steadying himself as he continued. "I don't want you to be just the maid anymore. I want you to stay as part of our family, if you'll allow it." Maria covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Her hands trembled, and her heart raced. She had never imagined this, never dared hope for it. And yet here it was, a recognition of her courage, her selflessness, and her love for Aiden, offered freely and without expectation. She simply nodded, unable to find words that could match the depth of her feelings. Aiden, sensing the weight of the moment, hugged Maria tightly. His small arms clung to her, and for the first time since his mother's death, the boy laughed. A real laugh, joyful, uninhibited, and full of life. The sound was like music to Alexander's ears, a promise that the darkness had passed, and that new light had entered their lives. The mansion, which had once been filled with shadows, fear, and danger, began to feel alive again. The walls, which had echoed with terror and deceit, now seemed to hum with warmth, safety, and love. Every corner of the home reflected a new beginning, a fresh start built on courage, trust, and the bonds of a family forged through hardship. Alexander looked at Maria and Aiden, then up at the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. He realized something profound. True family was not just about blood or wealth. It was about the people who stood by you when the world tried to break you. It was about the ones who risked everything to protect the ones they loved. Maria, once just a maid in the mansion, had become a hero, a guardian, and a vital part of their lives. She had listened to a cry in the night, ignored fear, and acted when no one else could. And because of her bravery, a life that evil had tried to snuff out had been saved. As Alexander knelt beside Aiden, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead, he whispered softly, "We're a family now, Aiden. You, me, and Maria. Always." Aiden smiled, clutching both of their hands, and in that moment, the mansion, once a place of nightmares, felt like a true home. A home built on love, courage, and unbreakable bonds. The sun disappeared behind the horizon, casting a peaceful twilight over the garden. The roses swayed gently in the breeze, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the world outside seemed safe. Inside, their hearts were full. Together, they had survived darkness, faced betrayal, and found hope. And in that hope, they discovered something even more powerful. Sometimes, the bravest heroes are the ones who simply answer a desperate cry in the night. Because one brave maid had listened, and in doing so, had saved a life that evil tried to bury, and had helped build a family stronger than any obstacle the world could throw at them. Sometimes, heroes aren't the ones in movies. They're the ones who hear a desperate cry and risk everything to save a life. Maria didn't just save a child. She reminded us all what courage, love, and selflessness really mean. If this story touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe, because one act of bravery can change a life, and maybe even change the world.